Every evening, just before the sun disappeared behind the tall trees, Elira Hastings carried a small basket down the narrow path that led to the edge of the forest. The villagers of Ashwood thought she was strange for it. They whispered that the woods beyond the old fence belonged to dangerous wolves, and that no sensible person would walk so close to them, let alone leave food for them. But Elira never listened to the whispers. She had grown up with very little kindness shown to her, and she could not bear the thought of any creature going hungry, wild or not. She was 24 years old, a seamstress by trade, and an orphan since childhood. She lived alone in a small cottage at the end of the village, mending torn dresses and stitching quilts to earn her bread. Her hands were gentle, her voice was soft, and her heart, though guarded from people, opened easily to animals. 3 years ago, she had found something in the woods that changed her life forever. 3 wolf pups, barely alive, shivering in the cold without their mother. She never knew what had happened to them, or where they had come from. She only knew that if she left them there, they would die. So she had done the only thing she could. She fed them, wrapped them in old blankets, and returned every single day, even in the harshest winters, until they grew strong enough to survive on their own in the forest. She never tried to cage them or bring them into the village, for she knew wild things needed freedom, but she never stopped visiting them either. Over the years, the pups had grown into young wolves, yet they still waited for her at the same spot near the fence every evening, tails wagging, eyes bright with recognition. The smallest of the 3, a pup with soft gray fur and unusually intelligent amber eyes, was always the one closest to her. He would rest his head against her knee while she cut small strips of meat for the other 2. She called him Little One, since he never seemed to have any interest in a proper wolf name. Of the 3, he was the one who never let her out of his sight. On this particular evening, the air was colder than usual, and a light mist drifted low over the ground. Elira wrapped her shawl tighter and sat down on the flat stone she always used, opening her basket as the 2 older pups came bounding out from between the trees. Little One followed close behind, more cautious, sniffing the air before he approached her. "There you are," she said softly, holding out a piece of meat. "I was starting to worry." She did not notice, at first, that someone else was watching from deeper in the trees. Cale Draven was not used to being ignored, especially not on his own land. As the alpha king of the Moonfire Pack, his word was law across the entire territory that bordered the human village of Ashwood. He was strong, feared, and respected among his people, yet for the last 3 years, he had also been a man haunted by grief. His mate had been killed in a brutal attack, and their newborn pups had vanished that same night, presumed dead in the chaos. He had searched for months afterward, refusing to believe they were gone, but eventually even his hope had worn thin. Since then, he had ruled his pack with quiet strength, never speaking of that night, never allowing himself to remember what he had lost. Recently, his warriors had reported strange scents crossing the northern border, wolf scents that did not belong to any registered member of his pack. Concerned that a rival pack might be testing his territory, Cale had come personally to investigate. He moved silently through the trees, following the trail, until he came upon a sight that made him stop entirely. A human woman was sitting calmly among 3 young wolves, feeding them by hand, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. His first instinct was anger. No human was supposed to know about shifters, let alone associate freely with wild wolves this close to packland. He stepped out from the shadows, his presence alone enough to make the 2 older pups instantly alert, ears flattening, low growls rising in their throats. Elira gasped and rose to her feet, instinctively placing herself between the pups and the stranger. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. "This is not your land." "This is exactly my land," Cale answered coldly, his golden eyes narrowing at her. "And you should not be feeding wild wolves so close to it. They are dangerous." "They are not dangerous," she snapped back, surprising even herself with her boldness. "I have known them since they were newborns. They would never hurt anyone." Cale's eyes moved past her, toward the smallest pup, who had not growled at all. Instead, the pup was pressed tightly against the woman's leg, trembling, staring at Cale with an expression far too aware, far too intelligent, for an ordinary animal. Something about those amber eyes struck him like a blow to the chest. He took a step closer, and that was when everything changed. Little one, sensing danger to the woman he loved more than his own life, panicked. Instinct older than thought took over his small body, and before Elira could stop him, a bright light rippled across his fur. Bones shifted, limbs stretched, fur retreated into pale skin, and where a wolf pup had been standing seconds ago, there now knelt a small boy, no older than 3 years old, tears streaming down his frightened face. "Mama," the boy cried out, his voice small and desperate, "don't let him take me." The forest went utterly silent. Kale could not move. He could not breathe. The boy's eyes, the very same amber eyes that had haunted his dreams for 3 long years, the eyes of his mate, the eyes of his own bloodline, stared back at him with pure terror. "It cannot be," he whispered, his voice breaking for the first time in years. Elira knelt immediately, pulling the sobbing child into her arms, glaring up at Kale with fierce protectiveness. "Stay back," she warned. "Whatever you are, whoever you are, you will not frighten him." But Kale was no longer listening to her words. He was staring at the child's face, searching for every feature that matched his lost mate, every trace of himself he could find. His hands trembled as he lowered himself slowly to the ground, trying to appear as unthreatening as possible. "What is his name?" Kale asked quietly. "I never gave him one," Elira admitted, still holding the boy close. "I found him and his brothers 3 years ago in these woods, nearly dead from cold. I have raised them ever since, though I never understood what they truly were, until this very moment." Kale closed his eyes, and for the first time since the attack, tears slipped down his face. 3 years ago," he repeated softly. "My mate was killed 3 years ago. Our pups disappeared that same night. Everyone told me they had died. I searched until I had nothing left to search with, and still I found nothing." Elira's anger slowly faded into confusion, and then into shock, as understanding began to dawn on her. She looked down at the trembling child in her arms, then at the 2 remaining wolves nearby, who had stopped growling and were now watching Kale with quiet, uncertain curiosity. "They were shifters," she whispered. "All this time, I thought I had saved wild pups. I never imagined. You saved my children," Kale said, his voice raw with emotion. "You kept them alive when I could not find them. You gave them a home when I believed they had none." As if understanding the importance of the moment, the 2 older wolves stepped closer, and one by one, their forms shimmered and shifted as well, revealing 2 more small children, a boy and a girl, both with faces that mirrored their fathers. They ran immediately to Elira, wrapping their small arms around her, calling her the only name they had ever known. "Mother," they said together, clinging to her as if afraid she might vanish. Kale watched the scene before him, his heart breaking and healing all at once. These were his children, his blood, the last living pieces of the family he had lost. Yet it was this human woman, a stranger to him just moments ago, who had given them warmth, safety, and love when he could not. Pack law was clear on such matters. Humans were not permitted within Moonfire territory, and shifter children were always raised among their own kind. His advisors, had they been present, would have urged him to take the children immediately and send the woman away, grateful but dismissed. It would have been the simple solution, the expected one. But watching his children weep and cling desperately to Elira, refusing to let go even when he gently reached for them, Kale understood something far more important than any law written by his ancestors. Blood had made these children his, but it was love, patient and unwavering, that had made this woman their mother in every way that truly mattered. "I will not separate you," Kale finally said, kneeling fully before her now, all coldness gone from his voice. "Whatever laws exist, whatever traditions my pack expects of me, I cannot ask these children to lose the only mother they have ever known, not after everything you have given them." Elira looked up at him, tears now falling freely down her own cheeks. "You would allow a human into your territory? Your people will not accept that easily." "Then I will make them understand," Kale said firmly. "You did not simply feed stray wolves out of pity, Elira. You saved my family. You gave my children a life I thought was impossible for them. There is no law more important than that truth." The little boy in her arms, the one she had called little one for 3 years without ever knowing his true nature, looked up at his father with the same amber eyes, then buried his face once more into Elira's shoulder, sighing with the deep relief of a child who finally felt safe. That night, Elira walked beside Kale through the forest for the first time, no longer as a stranger crossing forbidden land, but as someone being welcomed into it. The 3 children walked closely around her, occasionally shifting back into their wolf forms out of habit, before catching themselves and laughing, still learning to control the gift they had only just discovered. The pack house stood tall and quiet under the moonlight when they arrived, its windows glowing with warm light. Kale led them inside gently, aware of the whispers and curious glances from a few pack members who happened to be awake at that hour. He said nothing to explain himself yet, choosing instead to let the sight of his children, alive and safe, speak for itself. Elira settled the 3 children into a soft bed near the fireplace, tucking blankets around them as she had done every cold night for the past 3 years. One by one, their eyes grew heavy, exhaustion and relief finally catching up with them after such an overwhelming day. Little one reached out one last time before sleep took him, gripping her sleeve tightly. "You will not leave, will you, Mama?" he murmured. "Never," Elira whispered back, brushing the hair from his forehead. "As I'm not going anywhere." From the doorway, Kale watched quietly, his heart fuller than it had been in 3 long years. He had come into the forest that evening searching for trespassers on his land, prepared to defend his territory against unknown threats. Instead, he had found the mother his children had been silently waiting for all along, a woman whose only crime had been showing kindness to creatures the world had told her to fear. As the fire crackled softly and the children slept peacefully for the first time in a proper home, Kale allowed himself, finally, to hope again. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever traditions needed to change, he knew without doubt that the woman standing quietly beside his children's bed was no longer a stranger to his pack. She was its heart,